Hello and welcome to another tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate how I created this particular image. I was asked this question the other day when I posted it, and I decided that because it's a little bit complicated, that it would probably be easier to show the steps within a video tutorial as opposed to just written in a blog. So let's get started with little basics, the setup. This image was created using a Fuji X-T1. I had on a 15-stop neutral density filter by Stingray. It's a great filter, doesn't add a lot of color or anything to the image, which is what I like about it. It also allows the photographer to take a long exposure in the middle of the day, which this is. This is like high noon. On a fairly cloudy day, which was really nice, you'll see when you see the static images that there's actually quite a bit of blue sky and a lot of light, but once they're all blended together, you sort of lose that. But anyway, so I set the image up for time lapse. My camera allows me to do that in body, which is nice. And I set it up based on what I had as an f-stop. The f-stop I used was about f8. Let the shutter speed be whatever it was. I wasn't really concerned about shutter speed because I knew I was having a long shutter because of the 15-stop filter. So as a result of that, I set the time lapse to just be every second. So if it shot for 7 seconds and then took a second pause and then shot for 10 seconds, it didn't matter. I just allowed it to do its job, but set it up so it took consecutive images. And then I basically walked away. And this particular image is created from 37 consecutive images. And I could have let it go a lot longer, but had I, there probably wouldn't really be much left of the sky at all. And I just didn't need to wait any longer. I guess actually that's what it is you get impatient and want to go do other things. So side tip on that is, if you're going to set up a time lapse, it might be good to have a second camera body so that while the camera is doing the work on the time lapse, you're actually able to go take advantage and shoot other things. Because in this particular instance, I only had one camera body and I was limited while the camera was doing the work here. So anyway, so let's get started on how to actually blend this. Now, for this particular image, I decided to use the JPEGs. And I did that because the file sizes were so large that if I had used the raw files, it just would have been burdensome and really hard and taxing and slow for the computer. So it's easier to go ahead and just use the JPEG files. And I don't always shoot JPEG files, but this is one of those opportunities where I shot both raw and JPEG. So as you can see, I've got this selection here, and there is really from image to image very little change. What you end up getting is that sort of staccato effect in the clouds when you start to blend them together. Now, I am in Lightroom. I'm in Lightroom CC, and if you go ahead and right click, once you've selected the images that you're going to blend for this technique, if you just right click on any one of the given images and choose edit in, if you come all the way down to the bottom, you'll see where it says open as layers in Photoshop. And to get the end result, that's actually how you need to do this. It's not a stacked image in sort of a pano type of a process. It's just opened as layers. So it's going to take a few minutes for Photoshop to do its job. Okay, so as you can see, I have all of 37 images open over here on the right hand side. You'll see them in the layers panel. And right now, the blending modes are set to normal. That's just how they come in. And then you'll also notice in the bottom left hand corner that the size of this file as it is right now with the JPEG images is nearly 3 gigabytes. So it's a very large file, which means it's going to tax your system. And that's just sort of knowing going in. Now there's a couple of solutions to that. One, you can start to flatten layers as you go, or what I kind of prefer to do is change all of the layer blending modes to get the effect that I'm looking for. And then once I've done all of that, I'll flatten the image, get back down to the 91 megabytes that it should be, and then process the image. So really the task is quite simple. You basically start with the top image and you choose blend mode lighten. And you'll start to see that the image changes as you go. And it's a rather tedious task, so I'm going to actually hit pause while I go through the rest of these. Okay, so now as I get down to the final one, I'm going to go ahead and leave the very last layer just as normal. Now you can start to see here the little sort of jumps in the clouds, which is the effect that I'm going for. And it's really bright right here, and that's okay because we're going to fix that with Camera Raw. But now all of these layers above the base layer, which is down here, are all set to lighten. And what lighten does is allows the lighter pixels through. So in this particular case, the rocks have gotten a little bit lighter because some of the images I had clouds right over me and other images I didn't. So those all the light pixels start to show through, and that's fine. Now if you recall the final image, I did not have the foreground. I decided that I actually preferred the image. I thought it was a stronger image without it, so we're going to go ahead and crop that out ultimately. But for now, we're just going to start with what we have. Now, before I go ahead and flatten this image, I'm actually going to make a stamp of it, which is basically merging all the layers together and creating a new layer, which you can do by selecting all the layers, right-clicking, holding the Alt key, and saying Merge Visible. And as you can see, I've left all the layers below, but I also have this layer 1 now. And what that's done is it allows me to experiment a little bit in Camera Raw to see if I've really achieved what I want, or if maybe I need to go back through the individual layers and maybe delete layers that are too bright so that I can get that overall effect. But for now, we're going to start with this. And now that we have our layer 1, we're going to go ahead to Filter and choose Camera Raw. Now, we actually don't have very many blown out pixels, which is really amazing because it seems like it's really, really light, but in fact, those exposures were pretty good. Now, what we're going to start with is the graduated filter, which is this icon here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to pull down. Now, the neat thing about this is if you had held up a graduated filter in front of your lens, but you got to do it in post, you can experiment with the amount of exposure reduction you want. You can add some contrast, add some clarity to really define the clouds, which is the effect that I'm going for. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that this is what everybody else is going to go for, but this was the effect that I was trying to achieve, which was sort of a very graphic, artistic drawing effect on the clouds. So it might actually bring the sky down even a bit darker, make it moody. All right, excellent. So the next thing I notice here is that I've really actually darkened the clouds on the right quite a bit, and it's more than I want. The neat thing about Camera Raw is I can go into the filter here and I can choose brush. So even though I'm still in the same exact adjustment, I'm actually able to choose a brush and then say whether I want to add the adjustment elsewhere. So maybe I want to add that same set of effects down here in the foreground. I could do that with painting with the plus. Or in this case, I feel like maybe I've overcompensated, did a little bit too much here on the right, and I can remove some of that with the minus. So once you've chosen your brush, and I've got the minus selected, which means I'll be removing the effect that I just created, I can determine how much through flow. I can also determine the size of the feather here. So the dashed line around the outside of this circle is the outside edges of the brush. The dark line in the inside of the circle is actually the feather line. Now I can either change that by sliding the feather slider, or I can actually hold down the shift key and use the left and right brackets. So if I use the left bracket, it's less feather. If I use the right bracket, it's more feather. So it makes it a little bit smoother. Now that I've picked what I want, I can start to paint it out. And if I don't like it, I can come back, change to flow again, and just take a little bit of the effect right out of the clouds. Now it's not quite so dark on the right, it's more balanced. So for now, that's it with this particular brush. So because I just wanted to see if I had the end result that I wanted, I'm going to go ahead and say okay. Now I'm not done processing this image, this is just the beginning. I'll probably go back in and out of the Camera Raw filter a number of times to get to my final result. But at this point I know I got the effect that I wanted in the sky. So as a result of that, I can either flatten the image completely, because as you can see in the bottom left corner, I'm over 3 gigs now, or I could just actually select all of these lower images and just remove them. And as you can see now, I'm back down to the 91 megabytes that I would have had if it had been a single layer. So that's it. And that'll actually relieve some of the burden on Photoshop as I continue moving forward with my process. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead, crop the image. Now I like the reflection and I like the leading line into the reflection, so I think I'm just going to crop about right there. And the other thing I need to decide is whether or not this is really level. Now this is a lake, it goes way back, so it doesn't look level. I mean, I'd actually say it's probably not exactly level here. So for now I'm going to start with this and choose straighten, and say that from this point of the lake to this point of the lake should be the same, and you'll see it changed it just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and that has now cropped it so that it's level. So now that our horizon is straight and our sky is put together and started, we can actually go back into Camera Raw and continue processing. Now at this point, it is 100% just up to the artist what they want as an end result. So the changes that I make may not be the changes that somebody else makes in this particular image, but I'll go ahead and process till I get to the end result that I like. And in this case, I'm going to use the graduated filter again, only this time I'm coming up from the bottom, and then I want to darken the shadows here because I really want that reflection to stand out. Now I've gone into the adjustment brush. So this is a selective adjustment brush and it allows me to kind of paint effects where I want them. So by hitting, see, I completely messed up a line there. So if I select the adjustment again, you can see that I'm completely not aligned. And as a result, I can come back in, choose erase again, and just erase that part of the mask. Now what I did to actually be able to see the mask is I selected this down here in the right hand corner, right above OK and cancel. It says mask. If you click that, you'll see where you've actually painted with the mask. And if you don't want to see the pin, you can actually uncheck overlay. I tend to leave that because I move back and forth between pins, and so it makes it a little bit easier to do. Clean this up off the water. And if I want to add, I can go back up to the right under where it says adjustment brush under the histogram and just choose add. And as long as this particular pin is selected, I will be adding to that mask. As with the other brushes, the bracket keys, the left bracket makes it smaller, the right bracket makes it larger. So that allows you to sort of change the size of your brush in midstream, kind of in mid-stroke. This time I moved from my mouse to my pen, and I did that because I'm actually able to be a little bit more precise. Alright, so for now, that's good enough. We'll open up, we'll lighten it a little bit. So take this off so we can actually see the effects that we are putting in. Add a little bit of contrast and actually add more clarity. So I really want the building here to pop. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna hit OK. And you can see that made a huge difference in the way the building pops up off the land there. So from here, I would just take it into a black and white processor. Tonality Pro by MacFun, because I use a Mac, I tend to use that a lot. If you don't have a Mac and you're working on a PC, you might use NIC Silver Effects Pro. But at this point, anything else that I do to this is really all about preference. I can tell you with that final image from before that I really popped out the sky. I added a lot more clarity to the sky to really enhance it. I also spent some time doing some dodging and burning. But again, all of those other processes are really up to preference and whatever the photographer wishes to see. So in this particular case, it doesn't necessarily make any sense to go through each and every one of those steps. But the idea behind this is really, how did I get the sky to work the way that it did? And for that, time lapse set for every second, and then by changing all of the layers, bringing them all in to Photoshop as one single tab, and all the layers, in this particular case 37, and changing all of the layers to lighten so that you could see the movement of the cloud going through the sky. So I hope that's helpful. I hope you've learned a little bit about how to change your images up, maybe another way to use time-lapse photography to enhance images. And thank you for watching.